So single view, what can we get from a single view camera? So imagine we have an image from a camera and I say BIM with the same pose. Really, I mean a semantic digital model. And then you do some pre-processing with respect to that. Once you do the pre-processing, imagine that I want to identify whether these, let's say, beams exist in reality or not. So I want to do a mapping between the reality and the BIM using one camera. So because the colors are not the same, and this is obviously in a different dimension and everything, but it does have some geometry that is similar there. You cannot use the intensity images to be able to identify that, right? So you need to use some sort of other aspects such as geometry, in this case boundaries. So you get the boundaries, and then as long as you know the superimposition, meaning that the relative orientation and registration between your model or the image of that model and the image that you've captured, you can start superimposing it and see whether pixels of similar colors and similar properties are found within that or not. And this would be the simplest way for us to be able to identify whether those types of elements exist in this picture that we have or not. What that means is that even with one single camera, you can get some valuable information. Similarly, if you take a picture of, let's say, a regular rectangular building, like a box-shaped building, we call it rectilinear type structures. If you have something like that, using vanishing points, you would be able to calibrate the camera, and you would be able to model exactly what the locations of the floor and the columns are going to be. Using that, you would actually get some valuable information. You can even get progress information if you do a time-lapse imaging from one location. The only downside there is that you're not going to have basically access or visibility everywhere. So it only gives you information about that. But if you only care about whether the second floor has started construction or not, you would get that information. So with that being said, how do we even start calibrating these using vanishing points? So vanishing points is basically similar to if you take a look at the train track, right? If you take a look at it in a picture, what ends up happening? Even though these are parallel, because of the projective transformation, it basically starts going in infinity and getting into the same point. This is what that is. So as long as you can find these vanishing lines and those vanishing points, and you can identify it using a software such as FSpy, you would be able to get the camera calibration parameters. I've also put this in your pre-lecture activities. Hopefully, once you guys can actually access it through Ilias, you would be able to do that. In this case, I just go and I find 3 parallel lines in my image, and there are ways to be able to actually identify these through line detection in images. It's not going to be super accurate, but you can still get some information. And if you don't do it properly enough, as you can see, it doesn't give you a proper result. What does that mean? That means that it's highly dependent on how accurate you are actually identifying these. Once you do that, then you basically get the point. Then you can identify your particular, let's say, principal axis and the plane that you have there, and you can basically move it around and put it in the location that you want, and you can play around with it. If you have very, very good data, this would be much more accurate, and you would be able to identify those planes properly. Using that, then you can actually go and import all of that information into a software like Blender, and you can actually start doing modeling here. So this actually here is the plane of that. This is going to be the column. This is another column. And this by itself, what that means is that now we can go and project back these columns into that, see what the boundaries of that is, and then see if we have pixels of columns that comply with that as well. And that way you would be able to see what columns have been built and how. Okay, so this by itself gives you quite a bit of information and data that you can utilize. If you have particular types of, let's say, structures, particular types of problems, you would be able to solve that, right? So for the majority of our structures that look something like this, you would be able to basically get around with it with only a single camera and get a lot of information out of it.